Because we talk about equality and parity. And yes, I can manage to do bits of that through my work as a singer and a choir leader and a composer. But I'm interested in the development of strategy that makes a real difference to the infrastructure of the music sector, whether that be community sector or whether that be commercial music industry and everything in between. Empowerment for women's voices within that and for black people's inclusion within the decision making that happens at every stage of those infrastructures is what I'm interested in working positively to try and change at strategic level.
Hi there, and welcome to This Is Why We Sing, a podcast with me, James Sills, that's all about the transformative potential and transformative power of singing, and in particular, what happens when we sing together. Today's episode is all about empowerment and equality through singing, and my guest is Jennifer John. Now, Jennifer is a singer, a composer, a teacher, a mentor, and a true artist whose work is fueled by passion and by purpose. I first met Jennifer when I was living in Liverpool in the early 2000s, and I was invited to join Sense of Sound Singers, a group with whom I sung for many, many years, and really that's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now in my work as a singing leader, but also as an evangelist about the benefits of singing. Jennifer has been really instrumental in my own singing journey, and I know that she has for many, many people. In our conversation, we talk about tackling inequality within community music making and within the music industry as a whole. We talk about her vision for setting up Sense of Sound as an organisation, about her love for Liverpool, and also her composition Love Sings from Liverpool, the virtual choir project that I was very happy to add my voice to in 2020. We recorded this conversation whilst in lockdown in early 2021. Jennifer in Liverpool, myself in North Wales, and this is what it sounded like. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I know that the listeners can't see this, but I just want to compliment your amazing wallpaper.
Thank you. Cole and Son are responsible for that wallpaper.
Not sponsored the podcast, but purveyors of beautiful, beautiful wallpaper that you want to stroke. First question, Jennifer. The same question I ask everybody. What song's in your head right now?
Collage. Do you know that song?
I do not. Tell me about it.
By Lady Blackbird.
And tell me about Lady Blackbird.
She's just wonderful. She just has got this voice it's like full of depth and texture and an energy and a soulfulness that is just amazing. I just recommend everyone to go check her out if you don't already know about her.
Lady Blackbird?
Yeah.
I will do. That's one of the many joys of doing this podcast, is discovering so much new music.
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason that track at the moment?
Because
listening to it
just makes me feel great as soon as the beat kicks in. I'm a big lover of house music. I love dancing. And so every time I listen to her, I feel energised, upbeat, positive. I could go on.
Can't ask for any more than that. I've got to say, we're recording this on a Monday morning, so it sounds like a good track for a Monday morning at the start of the week. Now, I'm really keen to talk to you, Jennifer, about singing and music as kind of an agent of social change, because like so many people kind of in the creative world, you wear so many hats, vocal coach, composer, mentor, performer, entrepreneur. But the thread that I think that runs through all of your work is a real sense of purpose and a real sense of music and singing being so much more than just being music and singing for its own sake. It's about its potential for social change. So I feel there's loads to explore there. But when were you kind of first aware of this in your life? When you were growing up, that singing and music was more than just about something that sounds pleasant or is fun to do.
My parents are from Trinidad. And, when my father came over to England in 1958, and worked for 2 years before he could send for my mother. I think the legacy that I come from is one of rising above adversity. You know, both my parents, my father is no longer here, but both my parents had very strong visions about what they wanted their life to stop being and then what they wanted their life to become. So their trip to England was built on a false dream that was, at the time, Enoch Powell's River of Blood speech was very much about England being the land of milk and honey, the land of opportunities. And it was, for them it was. But the stories that they had to tell about what else it was too are the backdrop of my life. So I've always had a perspective and a sense of other parts of the world, and that opportunities that I've been lucky enough to have, a lot of people don't have. And my parents didn't have some of those opportunities. And so my sense of, gratitude and appreciation of life runs very deeply for me. And equality of opportunity runs equally as deeply.
Right. And I know that was a big part of your motivation for founding Sense of Sound in, was it the 80s in Liverpool?
We officially formed in 1992.
Okay.
But I had the idea before that about music should be for everyone.
Right. So, yeah.
And that was our byline.
Tell us about this, yeah.
So, for 5 minutes in my life, I was a consultant. And at the end of my post as a consultant, my then boss said to me, look, we've got an underspend of money and I'd like you to go away and write a report about something that you feel really passionate about, which I did. And I wrote the report on black women in music on Merseyside. As a result of the findings in that report, I discovered that there was a need for there to be a central place that all of these women could come together collectively and create within. I produced that report, I gave it to my boss. In order to create that report, I spoke to 70 black women from across the city. And the one thing that kept recurring was that they didn't perceive themselves as singers, even though I had discovered them because I'd seen them sing either in a community setting or in a local pub or on a stage. The majority of them didn't have the confidence to call themselves singers. And when I got to the bottom of why, it was because they hadn't received any official training and just felt like they didn't deserve the title.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it made me realise that actually these kind of perceptions about what success is, and also the way that we self-sabotage, is something that's really prevalent in human beings, and particularly in women, I think. And so at the end of that report, I created these workshops for those women to attend. They all came and the workshops got bigger and bigger. And I thought, these need to be formalised. And so Sense of Sound was born. I invited 3 other people to come join me and we turned it into a company.
Amazing. And that organisation has kind of morphed and changed over the years, but is still very much going strong. You talked about your love of disco earlier, and you've just been doing some collaborations with a Merseyside dance label, just bringing it right up to date, which is really, really thrilling sounding.
Well, I still, so the element of Sense of Sound that still exists is the ensemble of singers. Yeah. And a couple of years ago, I just thought, we've been together for years and we've never made a record. That doesn't make any sense. So I had
all the years that I sung with you, I don't think we ever recorded anything.
No, we didn't, because I didn't feel like... Well, actually, I think we were just being spontaneous, living in the moment, having experiences and then moving on to the next. But actually...
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was always very much about a live thing as well, a live art form.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But actually, it's nice to be able to archive things and to have a record. So, yeah, literally, we have records out. And so, we've got a single out at the moment, Show Me, which is a real disco classic that one of the singers wrote. Amber Cootie is responsible for writing that. So, yeah, we're doing a lot of that.
Amazing. Okay, we're hopping around chronologically, and that's good. If we go back again to the formation of Sense of Sound, you brought in more people to help you realise your vision. And I remember having, conversations with you in the past where you talked a lot about the kind of musical and social influence of Sweet Honey in the Rock in those days. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, when we first started, Sweet Honey in the Rock, for people who don't know, they're an a cappella ensemble of black women. Some of the early songs that we sang actually were by Sweet Honey.
Mm. Oh,
and then we got the opportunity.
Arrangements.
Yeah, they're just amazing. And they're very kind of spiritual women. So we were massively influenced by them, and we did joint concerts with them. And watching them and being in that arena with them taught us so much about.
I didn't know that you performed.
Yeah. And so it gave us a real grounding in the importance of that oral transition being passed down and the words that you sing being really important.
Now we know that singing is very cathartic, but there's a very specific project that you've been leading recently called the Liverpool Complaints Choir. Which sounds very cathartic. I wonder if you could tell me a bit about that.
Liverpool Complaints Choir was part of a much bigger global project. The idea came from a husband and wife team in Finland who took this idea around the world, and there are lots of different complaints choirs globally. Wow. When it came to Liverpool...
Complaints franchise.
They brought it to FACT in Liverpool. And then FACT approached me about being the composer and the workshop leader for that project. So basically my job was to sit in a room with the participants and listen to them complaining specifically about work, about their jobs, about the fact they weren't listened to, about the fact that working conditions weren't what they'd like them to be. There was a whole gamut of reasons why they were complaining. And then I went and turned their complaints into a choir piece.
Wow.
It was a great thing to do, actually. And for a lot of those people that were involved, they were like a bit scared about being exposed as the people complaining. But mostly we had a lot of fun.
What did it sound like? I can't imagine it was kind of, gentle, kind of restful, choral music.
Well, I had them, in the beginning, I had them sighing. So there was a lot of... And then the opening line is, I'm fed up, so fed up. And then we incorporated lots of body percussion and a little bit of pastiche, operatic pastiche that, rude people, that kind of thing. And we just had a lot of fun creating it. Yeah.
It sounds good.
It's good fun.
And I guess empowering of the people involved, because they could actually... we use the term, voice our complaints, but actually they were giving voice to that, They were literally getting it off their chests and giving voice to it, like you said. Which, as we know, is always good.
Yes.
Now, that was really interesting. You're talking about, body percussion and bits of opera because, I feel that you've always drawn on such a broad kind of music, so many different musical worlds. And if I think of some of your projects, they've seemed to have really bridged... what people might think as these kind of separate boxes of music. I'm thinking about Cream Classical here. I'm thinking about Damon Albarn's Monkey Opera. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I find that very empowering as well. Empowering on a kind of a musical level. Because so often in music, people exist in these kind of separate spheres, and they think that if you're into kind of club music, you can't be into orchestral music or whatever. And yeah, Jennifer's shaking her head. And I think you see music very much like I do in this sense, and that it's just this big picture of music. But I think you've been really proactive in actually making that obvious to people.
I just think I've been really lucky to be able to do such a range of different projects. I mean, like you just mentioned, Damon Albarn's opera. I mean, that opera was very left of centre. And it was in partnership with a group, an acrobatic ensemble of people from China. So we had to sing in Mandarin, and Damon's quite experimental in and off. His work is anyway. So sometimes we had to improvise, sometimes we had to make crazy sounds. I mean, that was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And then to do something else, like, what was the other thing you just mentioned?
Cream Classical.
And then Cream Classical, which is all about house music.
And yet it was in the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I just think, the juxtaposition of all of these things is what makes life interesting.
It absolutely is, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. We talked a bit about Liverpool there, about the Complaints Choir in Liverpool and, performing Korean classical in Liverpool Cathedral. Liverpool's obviously a big part of your life. It's where you've made your home. But a lot of your art, is very much infused with a sense of place and of Liverpool. And so I wonder if you could talk about Love Sings from Liverpool, which was your virtual choir project, a manifestation of this song that I know has been with you for longer than that. And if we're talking about, music as something about unity and, dealing with things that are just bigger than music in terms of social issues, that seems to tie so many of those things together in a 4-minute song and video. So could you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Love Sings and then its realisation as a virtual choir video?
I've always wanted to work globally. I like the idea that I like folk music for that very reason, that in all societies, folk music exists because it's the voice of the people and it tells the story of the people. And so I like that because it's about hearing what other people have to say, finding out about other people's histories and sharing your own. And so Love Sings, I wrote in 2017 because I wanted it to be the flagship song that I took to all of the projects that I work on, whether it be in my local community or in a community the other side of the world, because I think the song is about the celebration of music and of life.
It's almost like a manifesto. It's like it feels like your manifesto in a way.
Well, yeah, it encapsulates everything I think about what I do.
Yeah.
And why I do it. And so, Love Sings was written back then, and I wanted, at the time, I was trying to figure out how best to make that happen. How can I create all these global projects? So for me, lockdown, in that respect, was a bit of a blessing because it meant that I could do a global project from my living room. Obviously, I couldn't do that on my own. I found an amazing company who created the visuals and another company who created the sound. And in partnership, we created that. But it meant I could be global.
Yeah.
I could ask the people that I knew in various parts of the world to share the message that this project was going to happen. Create this project that when you look at it visually, even if you don't hear the sound, you can tell it's a global project because of the diversity of the people involved.
And that felt really central to the whole project, I think.
Yeah, it was really important that it was represented in that way.
And so how did it feel, having been from the stage of writing the song to setting it all up to bring in these agencies, when you finally saw the final version? There must have been like the first playthrough when you saw it.
I mean, I cried at the drop of a hat, but I cried when I first heard the mix from the studio of all the voices together. And then when I actually saw the finished result, I just had to have a moment because it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And actually in that video, it was important to me that I said to people, look, I just want you to be yourself. I don't want you to put on any big display of performance. I just want you to be yourself in your environment and share the song with me. And that's what people did. It feels very ordinary and down to earth.
Yes, in a really beautiful way, because there's a sense that people are kind of just sharing their authentic self.
And that was important. And that's important in all of my work, to be honest.
Yeah, just getting down to the core of who you are and how you want to express yourself. I think I recorded my video for that in my garden, if I remember.
Yeah, I think you did.
It was a wonderful thing, and I will put a link to the video in the show notes. So whilst Love Sings was very much a global project, it was also rooted in Liverpool. And I know that, you've made Liverpool your home, and that's a really kind of big part of your work. So let's just talk to Liverpool, because I guess a lot of listeners, the podcast, might know about the Beatles and the football, but there's so much else to Liverpool. So yeah, let's big up Liverpool.
Liverpool's just one of those magical places, really. It's got so much history, political history and social activism. And Liverpool's like I always liken it to, you know, the way that when you've got siblings or family members and you get on each other's nerves and you fight and you argue,
Yeah.
that's fine. You know, you can forgive and forget. But if somebody external from your family says exactly the same things that you said about a family member, you're ready to kill, you know. And so there's an unspoken loyalty to its own. So Liverpool's very loyal. You know, it's got a history of unions. You know, in the 80s, we saw that it was a very militant city. And it's a city, you know, Justice for the 96, for example. It's a city that stood behind its ethics
Yeah.
without backing down and with a lot of integrity if it feels like the cause is right. And that's one of the things I love about it. You know exactly where you are. But at the same time, it's got this magical not take itself too seriously vibe.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I don't think a day has gone by where I don't have a belly laugh with somebody about something. But again, you know, people from Liverpool don't like it if people from outside laugh at them or, you know, pigeonhole them. I guess nobody does. But so, you know, there's a lot of duality going on with Liverpool. But the thing I love is its heart and its loyalty.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Liverpool has a big, big heart, and I discovered that, you know, when I moved to the city to study there, and then when I stayed on and made Liverpool very much my home, and I think there's also something, because it's a port as well, you know, it's very kind of outward looking as well.
It can be. I mean, yeah, it's magical that it's a port. I mean, it means that the multiculturalism, the range of multiculturalism in the city is huge. So many different languages are spoken. I think it's something like 42 languages are spoken.
Yeah, amazing.
And also the musical influence that's been brought in through that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was alluding to, really, because I mean, you know, obviously we think about the Beatles, but it was because of people bringing in those records from America, wasn't it? And obviously we have a huge kind of Irish influence, and that's all in the mix.
A lot of it's in the mix. And now we've got even more. So we've got lots of Arabic music, Arabic influence. We've got lots from the West African coast. There's a lot of soca. My own parents, even though they brought me up in London, there's a rich West Indian tradition of music, because there was always the carnival that happened in Toxteth in Liverpool 8. And so all of those musical influences are still here, still part of the city's DNA, and I love that.
Yeah, and it's very visible, you know, so there's the amazing Africa OEA Festival.
Exactly.
At Sefton Park, and there's a huge, you know, there's the Arabic music festival as well, and it's just an astonishing kind of diversity for a city that is you know, comparatively fairly small, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so much to be found here if you bother to go and have a look.
Exactly.
Yeah, and definitely if you go and have a listen, go on the hunt for the music, you find it.
I've got to say, we're not sponsored by the Liverpool Tourist Board here, but
if you want to sponsor James,
yeah, that's very true, very true. No, I think there's also a thing about Liverpool. Like, when you know how great Liverpool is, you become quite evangelical about it, because certainly in the UK, you know, there are, you know, certain stereotypes or perceptions or whatever, and you know, it is a deeply soulful city. And I think that's why you made it your home, Jennifer, because, you know, you're a deeply soulful person. So I think you're a good match.
Well, thank you, James. But I actually fell in love with the humour.
Right.
After I'd finished studying, I started noticing that I started to take myself a little less seriously, because I came with that London swagger.
Yeah.
And I soon had that knocked out of me by friends. And so, yeah. I like that.
So there are so many, you know, projects that we've been talking about today, Jennifer. But is there one that you're kind of most proud of, or you look back and you think, wow?
Yes, when Sense of Sound, who is the group that I manage, the vocal ensemble that I manage, we were invited to open the show for Chic, Nile Rodgers and Chic.
You were invited To open the show for Chic.
Yeah,
Come on.
I mean, bucket lists. There are bucket lists, aren't there? And then there are, I don't know, something else.
What's the next level of bucket?
I don't know. But the next level is what that was. And so it was incredible. And it wasn't just that we got to open the show. It was just that after the show, when everyone was backstage and everyone was just winding down, we were invited into a room where Nile Rodgers was speaking about his musical history. And we were invited to ask questions and just hear his anecdotes and hear about how he is where he is and that whole political and creative journey.
Right.
And that, to me, was like having an insight into someone that was like, wow, it's not just about the music. It's about the historical importance, the equality issues, because as a black man working in an industry, some of those stories that he had to tell were very inspiring and actually gave me an injection of energy to keep going and make me realise that actually all of the work that I do around equality is worth it.
Yeah. Wow.
It does make a difference.
I wonder if people listening are aware of, the kind of social significance of like the emergence of disco and people like Nile Rodgers. Is that worth something expanding on?
Yeah, because I think, emancipation of black people in the same way, different musical genre, but yeah, disco is definitely deeply steeped in history. I was going to say that Gil Scott-Heron also is an incredible ambassador, or was an incredible ambassador for black voices being heard. I think people often don't realise there's a political attachment to black artists and what they have to say, because actually, especially within disco, because people just think about glitter balls and
they think it's all surface,
dance floors and roller discos, which of course it is.
Which is obviously great fun and valid in itself. Yeah, exactly.
But there's much more to it. Yeah, emancipation of black people.
So we talked about Nile Rodgers, Gil Scott-Heron. Where are the wells of inspiration that you draw from, Jennifer? Because you are in turn a big inspiration for many people. You empower so many people yourself. But who fills you up kind of creatively, musically, socially?
Do you know, I've got such a cross section of people that fill me up. I mean, strangely, Marina Abramovic. Do you know her, the artist?
I know the name.
Marina Abramovic is an artist who does amazing projects, and she pushes the boundaries of humanity. And every time I see a new piece of work by her, I'm just like, okay, that's the equivalent of what I want to do through my music. It's always about people. It's always about getting people in a room. And it always has a social, I'll be a bit more. For people who don't know her work, so there's a famous piece of work that I don't even know the name of, but if you type in Marina Abramovic red dress gallery, you'll see this project, which was that she sits in a chair and strangers can come and sit in the chair opposite her, and they literally look into each other's eyes for however long. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that exercise. I've done that exercise with a few people, and to me, it's one of my favourite exercises because
it's intense.
I don't find it intense. I find it really connecting. You can connect. So many stories get told in that simple act of human connection, which is about looking at each other, that you go through a whole series of emotions. It ranges from shyness to an apologetic connection and everything in between. And to me, that's a fast track to how people can be with each other when you take the time to actually connect. So she inspires me. There's a black American drummer singer called Anderson .Paak, who I'm listening to on repeat at the moment, who's just got this sense of rhythm like I've never quite heard before. His interplay between what he vocalises and drums, it's just amazing. And I just love that. He's just got a freedom and a courageousness in his approach to the music. It's all about the feel. It's It doesn't look like there's any calculation going on. It's about trusting the flow of the creativity.
And I guess it's one of those things where he's done the work already in terms of
Yeah.
so he can be in that space where he can,
Take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Once you've done your homework and the discipline is second nature, then you can really sit on top of it and create something phenomenal.
Yeah, that just reminded me of, I was really lucky to be in a room with Michael Sheen last summer, 2 summers ago, and he was talking about this, and I think someone asked him about, being, over prepared or being in the moment, particularly in relation to his acting, and I think he said something like, you do the work first, and then allow yourself to be in the moment, something like that.
Well, it's like having a solid foundation, isn't it? That's why the practice is really important to begin with.
Yes.
When you're first learning an instrument or you're learning whatever it is you're learning, so that the artistry that can then sit on the top knows that the foundation is secure enough.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is something we haven't actually really talked about today, Jennifer. But you do so much work as a vocal coach, as a mentor, as a teacher, where you're giving them that solid kind of technical platform for them to then go and express themselves.
So how I tend to describe myself, especially for my students, where it's about one-to-one and it's about me teaching vocal technique, is that I am a voice coach that specialises in artistic development.
Right.
Because I think that they need to work hand in hand if what you want to do at the end of it is be on stages.
Sure, right.
Because there's a psychology for singers that I don't think gets talked about enough. And it's that when you are the instrument, there's a whole set of psychology that doesn't quite exist in the same way as if your instrument is external to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so with my students, I talk, before I even ask them to sing, I ask them to tell me what's great about who they are.
Wow.
And often they can't tell me that because they've never even considered it as an option. And I say, well, what makes you think then that somebody will think you're great enough to come part with their money to come and see you on a stage? And that's where we begin. I think it's really important that you have a true sense of what's wonderful about you, not in an arrogant way.
No.
But in a authentic way. So you can say, I do this and I love it and this is who I am because. And then we can start the work on the singing.
That's amazing. I mean, what greater form of empowerment can there be really for people?
And it's that thing, isn't it? Because unless you feel great about what you do, the experience won't be as total as it could be.
Amazing. I feel like that's another whole podcast conversation we can have another time, Jennifer. So fascinating, so fascinating. So what's cooking at the moment? What are you working on at the moment? What might be coming in the future?
I'm hoping to do a lot more verbatim work, which is what I love as a composer and as a collaborator with people and their ideas or their stories. And then, translating people's stories into new work is what I'm all about. And doing that in as many interesting ways as possible, with as many different art forms. I am, at the moment, just before lockdown, I was on tour with an amazing vocal composer called Verity Standen. I mean, I've loved her work for years. She's fearless. And she invited me to come and audition for this latest tour, which I was in the middle of. We were in the middle of rehearsals and then lockdown happened. So at some point, that will resurrect itself.
That will come back.
Yeah.
And I also know that you're doing some more kind of strategic work now as well. We've talked about your working with groups and with individuals, but also you're sitting on quite a few boards as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the two main boards, because we talk about equality and parity, and yes, I can manage to do bits of that through my work as a singer and a choir leader and a composer, but I'm interested in the development of strategy that makes a real difference to the infrastructure of the music sector, whether that be community sector or whether that be commercial music industry and everything in between. empowerment for women's voices within that, and for Black people's inclusion within the decision making that happens at every stage of those infrastructures, is what I'm interested in working positively to try and change at strategic level. So it becomes part of people's, the powers that be, for want of a better term. I want to change their thinking to be far more inclusive about equality for all people, and not just think about how it benefits them.
Right. And this is at every level, because we've been talking mainly today about kind of performance, but actually throughout the whole industry.
Yeah, because... Yeah. And it can range from things like, think about your programming. Does your programming represent women enough? Does it represent Black people enough? And if not, then think about doing something about it.
Now, Jennifer, we have a podcast playlist where I invite each guest to choose one song. Dreadful question to ask anyone, especially a musician. Is there a song that you'd like to add to the playlist?
So I've been listening a lot to Lady Blackbird, and she's just this woman I discovered that was recommended to me actually quite recently. I love her voice. And so there's two things about her that I love. One is when she's... her kind of upbeat, housey disco tracks just really set me up for the day in a great way. They lift my mood, my spirit. But then recently I discovered this other song, which is called Beware the Stranger. And it's much moodier. You get to hear her voice in a much clearer way and hear how distinctive and edgy and raw it is. And so, that's going to be my song of choice, Beware the Stranger.
Fantastic. I'll add it to the list. Finally, this has been a whole series of life lessons, Jennifer, but if there's one particular life lesson that you can take from a life in singing, what would it be?
When you find your voice, I think you find your truth. And you find it on so many different levels. To be able to... God, I'm making myself feel emotional. Just give me a minute. Sometimes my father just appears, and he did just then, like a surge. So that's what this is.
It's okay.
Yeah. So I'll try again. Sometimes when you find your voice, you can find a truth. Our bodies are incredible. We have hearts, minds, and spirits and energy that are all connected. When we realise the strength in the connection of all of those things, it's incredibly powerful. I think I'm so fortunate to do what I do, and to be able to continue to do what I do is beyond a blessing. It's something much bigger than I am that I've been given. And I never forget how lucky I am to be able to do that.
And we are very, very lucky to be part of that as well, Jennifer. Thank you so much for our conversation today. Just amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jennifer for taking the time to speak to me for the podcast. I think you'll agree there's plenty to reflect on there from our conversation. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, you might want to go back and check out some earlier episodes. Because yes, whilst the podcast is about singing, it's actually about much broader issues, and using singing as a vehicle to discuss those. So go back and you'll find discussions about community, creativity, authenticity, joy, empowerment, and equality. Now, if you go to the show notes, you'll find links to several of Jennifer's compositions, including Love Sings from Liverpool, the virtual choir project that I was very happy to give my voice to back in 2020, and also a link to We Are She, a more recent composition and virtual choir project from Jennifer. A project all about female empowerment, composed with girls and young women from across Liverpool. I really encourage you to check it out. You'll find a link to Jennifer's website where you can find out about all the different projects that she's involved with, including her monthly Saturday soul sessions where you can sing with her via Zoom. And you'll find a link to the podcast playlist where you'll find Jennifer's choice plus all of those from the guests across the series. I really think there's something in there for everyone, so dive in and discover some great new music. Finally, thanks to you, the listener, for being here, for sharing the podcast, for getting in touch with me via my website or through social media. It's really, really appreciated. So until next time on This Is Why We Sing, keep singing, keep smiling, take care. Thanks again for listening.